Twin Busch, Germany, your competent partner for lifting platforms and vehicle garage equipment with 12 branches in 7 countries.
Your TW242CE will be delivered in one package. The column extensions and the hydraulic unit are located in the upper section, while the columns and all other parts are located in the lower section. You will also need 10 liters of hydraulic oil for commissioning. As a consumable product, this is not included in the scope of delivery. The TW242CEB4 can be configured in several different ways. If the ceiling height is low, the stage can be shortened by around 43 centimeters, for example. The stage can be narrowed by 17.5 centimeters, and the columns can be rotated 25 degrees forwards and backwards to provide more space for opening the doors. Let's start by unpacking the stage. First, remove the upper packages containing the column extensions and the hydraulic unit. Carefully loosen the inner packaging, as individual parts may fall out. We'll put the box with the small parts aside for now. However, please remove the instructions immediately and read them carefully before continuing with the assembly. We will also set the switch box aside for now. Here we see the individual parts for illustration purposes, starting with the motor or hydraulic unit and its housing, connecting plates, the second switch box and housing, 2 shorter support arms and 2 longer support arms, sensor rod, the parts for the cross member and the column extension. Now we drive up the motor crane and hook up the upper column to relieve the connection to the transport racks. In doing so, we take load distribution into account. The column must be lifted relatively far at the base because that is where the center of gravity is located. To lift it, we use a suitable lifting sling. Apply slight tension to the column without lifting the transport racks off the floor. To remove the upper column, one of the transport frames must also be completely removed. The frame at the base of the lower column is ideal for this purpose. The column cannot fall as far here. We unscrew the column from the transport frame, then the upper column can also be carefully loosened on the other side. Caution: if the column is not suspended exactly at its center of gravity, it may tip over easily. We are now moving the column to its future location. We must ensure that we are on the correct side. The column with the bracket for the motor unit is the main column to which the switch box with the main switch will later be attached. For optimal alignment, mark the exact center line of the stage on the floor before setting up. At the same time, consider which side the main column with the motor unit should be on. The base plates of the columns have notches that can be used to align the column base precisely according to the desired rotation. Then, all that remains is to determine the exact distance between the columns. But first, let's put the column down at its installation site. We make sure to place the column where it will later be erected. So depending on whether it is the main pillar or the supplementary pillar. To protect the column from scratches, we recommend using rubber blocks as a base. Now, let's move on to the small parts and check them against the packing list to ensure they are complete. Included are column protection, turntable, foot protection bracket, plug adapter, holder for plug adapters, door impact protection, support arm bolt, holder for motor cover, oil hoses, connecting cable, locking magnets, screws and additional small parts, as well as instructions. Here you can see the unpacked screws and small parts. We will also set the main switch box aside for now. We take one of the two column extensions and connect it to the column. Depending on whether you want to assemble the column at full height or reduced height, select the first or second holes here. We find the appropriate screws and screw the extension to the column. Now tighten all 8 screws. Now we set up the main pillar and align it using the line on the floor as shown in the animation above. After careful alignment, the column should be anchored directly in place in the ground. We will now show you how to correctly screw the platforms with heavy-duty anchors. Using a 2-post lift as an example, it is essential to note the required depth of the drill hole and the concrete thickness. If the heavy-duty anchor is not properly sunk into the concrete, or if the concrete does not meet the technical specifications, the stability of the platform may be impaired. Please refer to the operating instructions for the exact technical specifications. The platform does not need to be moved to set the heavy-duty anchors. Drill vertically and note the required depth of the drill hole. Clean the drill holes carefully, for example by blowing. Drive the heavy-duty anchor in carefully and straight using a sledgehammer. Before tightening the nuts, the columns must be checked for vertical alignment. If necessary, shim the posts on the heavy-duty anchors with the shims supplied. Once the columns are aligned, tighten the nuts with a torque wrench to the torque required according to the instructions. Now let's move on to the assistance pillar. We relieve the load on the column with the motor crane, remove the transport frame, move the column to its future location, and install the column extension. For safety reasons, we recommend that you mount the connecting plates onto the column extensions while still on the ground. Once the columns are in place, we can raise the crossbeam and attach it to the connecting plates. The second pillar is not erected immediately after assembly. First, we install the crossbar, which is needed to precisely align the second column. Here, too, we have the option of building a stage with a normal width, or one that is 17.5 centimeters narrower. This can be useful in confined spaces. However, this also reduces the maximum passage width and the pickup area for vehicles. In our case, we are installing the stage in the version that is 17.5 centimeters narrower. The crossbar is mounted with 5 screws. If the sheets are not yet mounted on the column tips, they should now be attached to the crossbar. When adjusting the angle, bear in mind that the crossbar in this image is still upside down. The second column should only be anchored in the ground once the crossbar has been put in place, and both columns have been checked for vertical alignment. This is how we avoid tension in the design. Make sure the area where you're setting it up is safe, and that the column can't accidentally tip over before it's anchored. We use a crossbeam lifter to move the crossbeam into position. Please secure the crossbar to prevent it from falling. Then the crossbeam can be lifted. We check once again that the column is aligned exactly on the center line using the notches. The crossbeam can then be screwed to the 2 columns. In our case, we screwed the retaining plates to the tops of the columns before erecting them. Then we connect the cross member to the retaining plate. After screwing the crossbar in place, you should check the vertical alignment of the assistance column again. If the assistance column is crooked, the distance between the columns must be adjusted if necessary. Depending on the ground conditions, it may also be advisable to support the column base with shims. Tighten all screws securely. We repeat the same process on the other side. We will now secure this side of the lifting platform as well. The rod for the circuit breaker is now simply inserted and screwed into place. It shuts down the stage if a vehicle roof rises too high. Your lifting platform should now be in position. Now we remove the steel cables and the hydraulic hose from the columns. One end of each steel cable is already anchored in the sled. For further assembly, the lifting slides must be raised to the first locking position. To do this, first install the release magnets and detents. We begin by installing the bar magnets. The 4 magnets are simply screwed into the open spaces as shown here. Then the brackets are hooked into the pins of the electromagnets and secured at the bottom with the appropriate angles. Then the pull sleds can be lifted into the first resting position. We unpack the motor unit and insert 2 retaining screws into the upper holes. To do this, insert a screw with rubber damping into each of the upper holes and secure it with a washer, snap ring, and nut. Then we attach the motor unit to the pre-assembled retaining plate on the main column. Then the lower screws can also be inserted with the damping ring, washer, snap ring, and nut. Then we lay the motor cable inside the column. Then we lay the motor cable inside the column. Then we take the cable with the special socket for connecting the solenoid valve and feed it into the column. The cable can then be connected to the valve. Now we fill the oil tank. To do this, unscrew the electromagnet to have more space when filling. Then we fill the oil tank with 10 liters of hydraulic oil, but no more than the max mark on the tank. Then close the tank again and replace the electromagnet. Now we can connect the motor unit to the hydraulic system. To do this, move the pre-assembled T-piece from the inside of the main column to the outside and secure it in place. It is very important to tighten the connection on the hydraulic block securely before continuing with assembly. Then the supplied hydraulic hose can be fitted to connect the hydraulic system and the engine block. We take the oil hose and attach it to the T. Tighten all connections once again. Now let's move on to installing the switch box. We pre-assembled the screws for the switch box on the main column. We don't screw them in completely. We run the cables from the column through the hole in the switch box. Then the switch box can be hooked onto the column and screwed tight. We connect the electromagnets to the designated connections in the switch box. Then we mount the second control unit on the opposite column. Now we come to the laying of the steel cables. If possible, place 2 ladders next to the stage for this purpose. To lay the steel cables, the nuts and washers must be removed from the threaded rods. Then we lay the first rope over the traverse. There are 2 pulleys in the traverse. We lay the steel cable over the pulley so that the cable runs as vertically as possible in the column, and the 2 cables do not cross later. So, on the side where the rope is also attached to the bottom of the sled. The cables and hoses are routed through the brackets in the middle of the crossbar so that they cannot rub against the ropes. These are fed into the main column one after the other. At this point, check again that the cables, hoses, and steel cables run smoothly over the crossbar and cannot rub against each other. Now repeat the same process on the main page. Remove the nuts and washers from the threaded rod again and insert them into the crossbar. Next, we route the loose control cable for the electromagnetic release over to the assistant side. Here too, make sure that the ropes and cables are not tangled and will later run smoothly past each other. The cable is then laid through the cable duct on the assistant side. This cable is for controlling the solenoids. We lay the cable over the hole to the outside and connect the upper electromagnet directly. With an extension, the lower electromagnet is then also connected to the same cable. We cover the opening with a plastic cover. Then the control unit, together with the cables and electromagnets, can be concealed with the narrow housing. Next, we will address the limit switch for the roof protection. First, we feed the cable end of the roof protection switch through the hole in the crossbar upwards into the main column. The cable is then laid in the main column through the cable ducts to the switch box. Next, we will install the roof circuit breaker. The end of the cable is then fed through the cable ducts via the hole in the column into the switch box. If the stage is to be set up at its full height of 430 meters, the hydraulic hose must be extended by the assistant. To do this, use the extension hose and adapter supplied and tighten the connection securely. Then we can attach the hydraulic hose to the upper opening of the T-piece. Finally, the cables and hoses are neatly laid in the columns using rubberized pipe clamps. We may need to use a cable tie for additional support. Now the wiring in the switch box can be completed. Please note that electrical installations may only be carried out by a qualified electrician. Please refer to the instructions for the exact wiring. If you decide to build the stage lower, the steel cables must be reattached to the sled to shorten the cable by approximately 86 centimeters. Please refer to the operating instructions for details. In any case, Push the lower threaded rods upwards out of the carriage once. For a wide stage setup, the nuts must be located at the ends of the threaded rods. If this is already the case, just check once more that the nuts are securely tightened. Since the stage can be set up either wider or narrower, the steel cables must be shorter or longer depending on this. However, this adjustment is made exclusively via the threaded rod. If, as in our case, you want to set up the stage in the narrow version, loosen the lock nuts and screw the nuts completely onto the threaded rod. Then lock the nuts in this position. This will shorten the rope by the required length. Then the rod can be pushed back into the slide. Afterwards, the ends of the steel cables can be fastened from the opposite side with a washer and 2 nuts each at the top of the sledge. Repeat the adjustment on the other side. Let's move on to the installation of the support arms. To install the support arms, it may be necessary to pull out the support arm fasteners slightly in order to insert the bolt. We secure the 2 bolts with saw rings. We can then start using the turntables. Now just mount the foot guards. Let us now proceed to the commissioning of the stage. First, we apply some tension to the 2 steel cables on both sides and tighten the nuts on the threaded rod. We now repeat the same process on the other side. Now let's move on to the oil cylinder. At the top of the hydraulic cylinder, there is a screw for venting, which we loosen slightly. After connecting the lift to the power circuit, we switch on the main switch. When we want to raise the lift, the pressure in the oil cylinder is released. After carefully starting the stage, some oil should leak from the screw. Then tighten the screw again. Then we install the ring for attaching the cylinder. When we operate the lifting platform for the first time, the hydraulic oil is distributed throughout the hoses. Therefore, after bleeding, hydraulic oil should be topped up to the max line. However, make sure that the stage is completely drained to avoid overfilling the tank. Next, we will install the bracket for the motor cover. Then we attach the motor cover to the bracket. Once we have finished with the engine cover, we go back to the control box and attach the cover there too. Make sure that the power cable runs through the opening to prevent it from being crushed. Now we will install the column protection. Then we install door protection to prevent damage to the car doors when opening them. At the top end, the column protection is hooked in and tensioned with 2 springs. We will now attach the bracket for the plug adapters. Then we put the plug adapters in place. Ensure that all screw connections on the lifting platform are properly and securely tightened before putting the platform into operation. Last but not least, we do a test run, during which we raise the lift all the way up and then lower it all the way down.
Correct cable adjustment guarantees the synchrony between the carriages. This lift was recently installed. We'll show you in detail how to perform the adjustment on the thread ends of the cables. When the steel cables in the lift have been recently installed, you can hear the clacking of the safety locks.
Hört man beim nach oben fahren das Einrasten der Sicherheitsrasten. Das Klackgeräusch.
The clacking of the safety locks is very uneven here. At the same time, this means that the carriages are not synchronized.
Unterschiedlich ist.
With a perfect adjustment, you can clearly hear a clacking of the safety locks on both sides at the same time. And this is the adjustment we perform now. We raise the lift to the locking position for this. Make sure the lift is locked in the same position on both sides.
In der gleichen Lockposition befindet.
The cables are still very loose here. The steel cables are given a certain basic tension right and left, approximately the same for now. The cables have received a certain basic tension by feeling the same tension right and left. We'll do a test run now and check the synchrony. It is clearly recognized that one side clacks first, in this case the main side. Now go back into the locking position and simply tense a little further on the side which clacks first while lifting up.
Etwas stärker nach.
The result should be better during a new test run. We should have achieved perfect synchrony now. Both sides clack at the same time. A test run with the vehicle can be performed now. It's clearly heard that one side is a bit ahead here. This side locks itself before the opposite side. In this case, wait until the lift reaches both locking positions. Set the lift onto the safety locks and tense the side which clacks first again.
Wo es eben zuerst geklackt hat.
Done. Now we also check if the lift remains as even at the turning point.
Gleichmäßig absetzt.
Lift up from the lock. The lift goes up relatively even. Lock the lift. The lift is set on the safety catches. Through this small offset, which can be recognized at the turning point between lifting and lowering, we can see that there is a small deviation. Now both sides are given some more tension. It's okay. It's possible for the tension between the cables to feel different even with a perfect adjustment of the steel cables. This is typical. Furthermore, we recommend to lubricate the steel cables after a successful adjustment. Commercial multi-purpose grease or motor oil are perfectly suitable as corrosion protection and to slide better over the pulleys. Of course, block the nuts after finishing the cable adjustment.
Visit us in one of our branches. With 12 branches in 7 countries also in your area. We offer advice and product demonstrations in our showrooms, as well as sales and technical service on-site with our service fleet. Warehouse logistics with large stock of products available for an immediate delivery. Spare parts and repair service assembly videos with step-by-step instructions, as well as constant new and further developments of our products. Everything from a single source, from lifts to tire changes and tire balances. Awarded 9 times as the best brand. Twin Busch, Germany, your competent automotive garage supplier.